Opening restaurants is the easiest thing in the world, okay? All you need is money, okay? Keeping them open is where it gets really hard.
Tim Petrillo, the restaurant people. Thanks for coming on like a champion.
Yeah.
Super excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Dan and I have been talking about having you on the show for a while, and having lived in Fort Lauderdale for a long time, very familiar with your organization and the restaurants that you have, and very highly respected in an industry that I think, at least the perception to me, is having worked in it a little bit
Yeah.
when I was in college, a very difficult industry to truly not only just make it, but really succeed to the level that you have. And so,
Well, thank you. I don't argue it's difficult in industry for sure, so I'm not arguing there.
yeah, so I mean, I that's just the perception. And there was an article years ago written by the Zagat family,
Mm.
and it was basically like, I think it became iconic. It was like, if you think you're getting into the restaurant business, think twice.
Yeah.
But my wife and I and my family go out all the time, and we enjoy it and we appreciate it. And when you see excellence like you have at YOLO and S3, where we go all the time, and New Bay, you appreciate that because you have at least some perspective as to this is not easy to do, to execute on the food and feeding so many people and making everybody happy.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, everyone, our business is very accessible for people. Like a lot of people can't walk into your business and kind of understand or think
Yeah.
they know what you do or how you do it, but everybody walks into our business every day. So there's a love for it. And a lot of times people, it's their dream until they get into it. And it very quickly becomes their nightmare because they're not exactly sure what they're getting into, right? Having a dinner party for 20 people is very different than opening a restaurant
Yeah.
with 200 seats and that other things, right? So,
There's so many aspects to it, right?
mm,
I mean, just, you got the food, and then you've got dealing with people and logistics and timing and facility issues and all of that stuff. And I just find it fascinating to see it all in action and in motion. And what set this off for you, like this journey? You've been in the business for, you've been building hospitality experiences for
yeah,
30 years. Like,
yeah.
how did you get into this business?
Well, like most people get in this business, I was living. I'm originally from Boca Raton,
Okay.
uh, and I was going to high school at Pope John Paul, and my parents thought Boca was getting too developed. This was when Military Trail didn't go all the way past
Yeah.
Palmetto Park Road, so they're like, okay, we need to move further north, and they moved about 25 minutes north to a small oceanside community called Ocean Ridge. Now, at the time it was just a small oceanside community, and so all my friends were in Boca, 25 minutes away. I didn't have anything to do, and during the summer, so I walked across the bridge to this place called Banana Boat, which is still there.
Oh, wow.
And at 13 years old, I asked, do you have any jobs? And the guy threw me a shirt and says, okay, you know how to bus tables? And that was my training. And I was off to the races my first night bussing tables.
Baptism by fire.
It seriously, it was like that. And at the end of the night, these people are coming up giving me all this money. I'm like, back then, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm getting tipped out $10, $15, and it's all this cash. And I go to the bartender at the end. I'm like, what am I doing with all this money? And the guy's like, that's yours. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm hooked. So that's really where it started, and I just was in it ever since. Went to school for it. Transferred to FIU from Florida State in hospitality management. They had a more sophisticated program at the
Oh, yeah.
time. Started working in some high-end restaurants in Miami, and then I went to go work for Hillstone, which was known as Houston's
Yeah.
back then, and opened a bunch of restaurants for them. And then they moved me to Fort Lauderdale. That's how I came to Lauderdale.
How did the restaurant people come to be? How did it come to be as you as an owner and as a proprietor?
Sure. So I knew I wanted to open my own restaurant, and it was always on my radar. Even when I was recruited away from Houston's to go for work for a celebrity chef named Mark Militello, who owned Mark's Las Olas at
Oh,
the
yeah,
time.
sure.
So I knew him. He kept on coming into Houston's. He hired me away. So we opened up. He had Mark's place. We opened up Mark's in the Grove, Mark's Las Olas, Mark's South Beach, and then I left right before Mark's Boca opened. But I was working on Las Olas, and
Hmm.
Peter, our chef partner, was working as the chef there. And at the time, Alan Hooper and I were friends. We had just met recently, and we were talking about doing something together. He had a contract on a piece of property, which was Himmershey Bar and Grill at the time on Second Street,
Yeah.
and right back then there was Tavern 213 across the street,
Yep.
and there was not much down there.
Yep.
Uh, Planet the Good Planet Cafe was down there, and there was not much else. It was really pretty much Blight and
Mid 90s.
yeah, mid
Yeah.
'90s
Yeah.
exactly. '95 is
Yeah.
when, and so we decided to open a Himmershey Bar and Grill together with Peter, myself, and Alan, and we sketched out the business plan literally in Alan's kitchen table. It's it's not a cliche. We actually did that, and we each put in it was $35,000 a piece. Okay, so that was our first restaurant, and then I raised, you raise money from the three F's: friends, family, and fools, the first go around, and my parents went along, and my and Alan's mom went along, and that's how we opened it. It cost us $143,000, and that was, now in comparison, what they cost now is
Yeah.
dwarfs.
I
That
was
doesn't
gonna
even get us
say
a
it
kitchen
sounds like
these days. But we did all the work ourselves. Alan was a contractor. We were literally building this stuff ourselves, and we
yeah.
did it on a shoestring budget, and it was one of those experiences where I'm so glad I went through it, because it's all perception. When you're going through the grind of something,
Yeah.
when you can look back to a day that was way harder than the day you're in now, it always helps you get through it. And I will reflect on those days all to this day. When it gets hard, and when it gets, you know, to be a grind, it doesn't even, it pales in comparison to those days. So you go from painting, fixing, building, to changing and training a staff, and then opening for dinner, and yeah, it's very different. But and we were off to the, well, we weren't really off to the races. We about folded. Okay,
Yeah.
we opened
That was
in
a really like sort of transitioning
it
area
was
at the
a very
time.
bad
It was
area. It was what we could afford. Back
yeah.
then, it wasn't a destination. Broward Center had just recently opened. It wasn't gaining much traction at the
Yeah.
time. The Museum of Discovery and Science was down there. It was gaining traction. You could tell the area was on the come, but
Yeah.
it wasn't close. And the restaurants, you can't be too far in front of a trend, because it takes a lot of money to run a restaurant every day, and you need to make sure you have the sales to support that run rate, and we did not. So we opened up in August. We were dying. We were doing, now I was working at Hillstone, and I was working at Mark's, and we opened a store, and you're doing
Yeah.
right away, you're on weights, you open up,
Yeah.
you're like, it's a given. So I had this unrealistic expectation that I was going to do the same thing that they did because of their reputation. I didn't have a reputation. I had their reputation before. So when we
Yeah.
opened,
Yeah.
there was not, there was my friends, but that was it. And we were doing, like, on a weekend, we would do 30 covers a night, which is not much, okay?
Right.
And then we had a couple of nights where we did 0 covers. So I can't tell you how hard it is to keep your staff motivated
Yeah.
when there's nobody coming in the door. Now they're there to make tips, okay?
Yeah.
They're not, the
They're not making it.
they're not making any money.
Yeah.
So they're there because they believe in what you're doing. But if people aren't coming in the door, they're not going to stick around. So I'm doing my best to keep motivated, and so literally we were, back then banking was a lot different. It wasn't electronic banking, so you always had the ability to float checks and
Yeah.
hopefully get your sales to offset your payables. It was a game you played with
Yeah.
floating, and we were constantly doing that. And one thing that we know happens, if you bounce a payroll check,
Yeah.
your staff is gone. Or you bounce a
Problem.
vendor check, you go on COD, you can't play that game anymore. So we were literally playing that game, and I got my resume together, and I'm like, okay, this isn't working out. So I literally, and I'll never forget it, on my birthday, it's the day after Halloween, and Sun Sentinel was just going to web-based publishing, and they would publish you know, when we opened, there was no social media. So
Yeah.
it was, you either had to pay for advertising or you had to get reviewed, okay?
Yeah.
Because everybody read the newspaper back then. and everybody found out about restaurants through critics or advertising. That was it. You know, it wasn't this. Social media is an incredible, powerful tool for new businesses that we didn't have the luxury of. So we had to wait for this review to come out, and we weren't getting reviewed, and you just it was back then. It was a blind review. Didn't know who the reviewer was, and they typically came in a couple times. So back then, John T was the critic at the Sunset a long time, but he used to publish under M.L. Warren, who we used to think was a female. So we were looking out for M.L. Warren as this female, and John T, who has since passed, he was doing the reviews. So Wednesday nights, they used to they used to go live with the dining reviews that would be published in the Showtime paper on Thursday mornings for the weekend. And I'm closing down, and I would be, I'd open the restaurant and close the restaurant and walk home. I was living on in Coley Hammock, and I'd walk at 2 o'clock because my ex-wife and I had sold our car, the whole 9 yards, and I'd walk to the restaurant in the morning. I'd walk home at 2 o'clock in the morning from Second Street to Coley Hammock, and so I'm literally as defeated gets, right? You as an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and now you've had a year of building the restaurant, about 4 months of just hell of running the restaurant. You're defeated. You're about to throw in the towel. So I'm in a very low place, dark place, and then I hit the review, and up comes the Himmershey Bar and Grill review, and I could not have written this review better myself. I literally,
wow. What a break.
it went from doing 30 covers on a weekend to 300, doing,
Amazing.
100 covers a night. And literally we were off to the races. It was like a light switch. And and what used to happen with critics is they all know each other. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you and I are well-respected critics, and I work for the Sunset, and you work for the Herald, and I review a restaurant, you're not going to go behind me and just, if it's awful, you are, but you probably give a little bit more liberties. Yeah, your liberties to not crush your friend review. And we rode that wave. So we were getting then the Herald, then every other paper was in it. So when we got voted best restaurant in Broward County and the whole 9 yards, and then we were off to the races. And like 6 months later, Alan, because he's not in operations, he's bored. I'm like, dealing with all this stuff. He's like, let's go do another one. I'm like, are you out of your mind? I'm working my ass off here. And so he's like, I'll just work on the real estate aspect of it. And then the next thing you know, we did Tarpon Bend like within that next year, and then we did the River House, then we did Sidebar, and then we just kept opening restaurants a year at a time. Then we did Tarpon Bend and Coral Gables, and then we were off to the races.
Yeah, I think I still have a free drink chip.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. We have so many of those. I mean, those wood tokens.
Yeah.
I have people send me them. Okay, he's like, "Are these still good?" Or send me pictures of them. So we're contemplating how we bring those things back, because I get pictures of people's in their desk, all these Tarpon Bank tokens. They have jars of them on their desk. It's pretty funny.
That's really, I was going to say too, before you were talking about how Himmershey turned the corner, I feel like I might have kept you in business. Well, at Sidebar.
Yeah.
Came back from college, that was the spot.
Yeah.
And we really didn't have any spots like that prior. I felt like to when I finished college in '99, and that was you guys were the bell cow. Like you created that whole area.
So what's interesting? I think why Himmershey Bar and Grill was successful is because people are so much more well educated in food now than they were then. Okay.
Yeah.
Because of Food Network, because of social media, people have a way more access to food and knowledge about food and things like that. So we were the first to really make we were doing really high end Michelin star food at Mark's. He won the James Beard Award. He won a top chef in the country. So we were doing this elevated food, but none of my friends could ever afford that, right? They couldn't go in and they couldn't buy, they're not going to spend at the time. Back then it was like, $35, $40 a plate.
Yeah.
And so we could afford, $15 to $20 a plate. So we kind of brought that price point and did elevated food. and made it just very approachable. And I think that's what really resonated with people. Like coming back from school
Yeah.
and because it was it was people all that are all our own age at that time going into those areas back then.
And so that was actually kind of already led into my next question, but that moment or that time period when you realized, hey, we've got something here, we think let's go out and do it again.
Yeah.
And what makes it so unique to me about your group is that all your concepts are unique. So like,
Yeah, we don't
um,
do it easy. That's one thing. It's like, and I say that as a joke, but it's also true. The easiest thing to do is replicate, right?
yeah,
Because you've built out the risk,
it's the
you
whole
see what
franchising,
works.
right?
Now you just kind of replicate. And we did that with Tarp and Ben. We opened a few of those, and I found that our strategy with having the real estate, having the restaurant, owning real estate around it,
Mm-hmm. It's
developers,
a bigger play.
real estate developers, the hardest part of their job in development is, well, there's a lot of hard parts in development, but the end user
Yeah.
and the co-tenancy of the end user is always a challenge with developers. So we have the asset where we can be the end user, and it's like you look at Fat Village, we are recruiting a lot of my relationships from the hospitality community because they know how we operate. They know what kind of operators we are. They have trust that they're gonna if they sit next to us in a development, we're not gonna be doing 3-for-1 shots and all this other stuff. We have like-minded operators that are going to go and focus marketing on a quality consumer that is in the same genre that they market to.
So Tim, sticking with that sort of same thought process of the evolution of the concept, like what does that look like? Right? You look at documentaries on song
Sure,
makers, right, and bands. And
sure.
how did that song get made? Did you start writing the lyrics first, or was it did the melodies and then you put lyrics to the melodies? Like when you're working on a new concept and your executive team, like, and obviously your chef and Peter, and like, what does that look like? Like,
So,
what's the
so yeah,
evolution there, and how do you decide it really
yeah.
has legs
So,
or
so,
doesn't?
so first off, we start with the real estate and the location first. Right?
Okay,
That's
that's interesting. Yeah,
that's really important for us.
the restaurant business is essentially real estate.
Yes, and every time I veered off that, it's stung.
Yeah, a
Okay.
lesson. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
similar to what we have, right?
Yeah.
Every time I kind of veered off of that plan, it stung. So we try to get the best locations possible. Now, that sometimes those happen in developments, right? Sometimes those happen organically, like on Los Olas Boulevard, and a opportunity comes up, or you start to uh, kind of negotiate or try to find out about locations. And that's kind of been a reason why we do different concepts is because we look at the real estate first. We say, this is good real estate. What's this market missing in terms of F&B options?
Hmm.
And is there something that we can program here that will resonate with the demographic here?
Hmm.
And then we kind of work backwards into that. And we're doing and again, a lot of our research is done way in advance of any time we announce a location, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're working on a Mediterranean Asian concept that is going on Los Olas Boulevard. Well, we secured that real estate 10 years ago. We started thinking about what's the market missing,
Hmm.
and that's why we are leading in with this concept. Now I think that our skill set, because we have so many concepts and we have so much data in Greater Fort Lauderdale, that bodes well to figure out what might be a void in the market. But at the end of the day, it's a highly educated guess, and
Hmm.
but the key word in that is guess. I mean,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, there's no, this is going to work. I don't care how many concepts you have. I don't care how many
Yeah.
units you have. We've worked with private equity before, and we've rolled out a bunch of units. And there's been times where I was like, okay, all the data says home run,
Hmm.
and all the what it was a thud, right? We did a we did a we did a restaurant that when I was working with Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza, that was, I mean, was right outside Millennium Mall in Orlando, and traffic patterns, demographics, traffic counts. And we're like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then it just didn't, you know. That's the magic of it. If it was checking a box in each of the boxes and just go. Now, granted, the more boxes you check, the higher probability,
Yeah.
but it's
Right.
never guaranteed.
Do you guys do, for lack of a better term, a postmortem
Ah, we do
analysis on why
postmortems.
did it not work?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We do postmortems about events. We do postmortems about
Mm.
just about everything. Like, we'll do postmortems about our how we did handle the holiday season. We'll do postmortems about how we actually, launched a new product, and
Mhm.
we do postmortems about everything. We just
I think that's healthy.
it's
Right.
it well, I think you learn more from what didn't work than what works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. What's the toughest lesson that you can remember?
Okay, I will say,
Failures or what have you?
well, yeah, I would say that the toughest lesson I ever learned, or the lesson I always take into account now, is never listen to the press on both ends. You're not as good as they say you are.
Yeah.
You're not as
Yeah.
bad as they say you are. And when you listen too much, especially on the good side, you tend to get way overconfident,
Get a little high on your own supply.
and that's when you get crushed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fork and Balls was a very good teaching moment for me.
Hmm.
We saw a concept that worked in New York. We I loved the simplicity of it. I loved how guests were using it in New York. I thought it would work easily down here. You know, it did. There's a variety of reasons why it didn't work, but again, meatballs in 80 to 90-degree weather 6 months out of the year is a tough
Yeah.
sell, right? And again, the location was a high pedestrian concept. That
Hmm.
location wasn't in a high pedestrian area. It was a quick service model before quick service was quick service. That's when we saw that. So
We
so
went there a number of times.
what's that?
My parents lived on 13th Avenue in a
Okay.
townhome, and every once in a while we'd stay there,
Yeah.
or like we had a house tenant once, so
Yep.
we stayed there for three
Yeah.
days, and my kids loved it, and they seemed to execute well on the concept, but you know,
Yeah.
but it's I guess it's a little more sleepy that far east on Las
And
Olas.
it's gaining. Again, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Again, but it comes down to real estate. At the end of the day, we could talk about all the positive things the concept had and everything, but it didn't have enough it didn't have enough traffic come in. So it was either the location, the product, or the execution. Okay, one of
Yeah.
those three things is why. So,
So
or
that's a
maybe
concept that, sorry, go ahead, finish.
it's maybe one of those things, maybe all those three things,
Yeah.
right?
So that's a concept that you more or less garnered from New York City and thought maybe it would be a good application here, and it just didn't
Yeah,
get
it just didn't
traction.
pan out. Now we look at it from we look at the what ifs in the negative standpoint more than we look at the possibilities.
Hmm.
Sometimes you get caught up in the possibilities and you overlook well, what if this doesn't, what if
Yeah.
they don't respond to this, or what if, those types of things when you're vetting the concept, and that's where you get in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tim, post COVID, it seems like there's a number of headwinds in food service, right, in restaurants, business, and most notably, from what I've seen, cost of food and cost of labor. Um, I don't know. I've never seen any statistics about labor, but there's it's been said that many found different careers,
Oh yeah.
during that time. So I'm just curious, how are you dealing and navigating with those headwinds?
So I don't want to say post COVID. I think the restaurant business is always filled with headwinds. Okay, whether
Yeah,
it's
sure.
whether it's right. I would say this: anytime you have to, the point of contact between the guest or your client, how many people touch that person to get to a great experience? So in my line of work, you think about it, you have A person calls to make a reservation, that's one point of contact. A person comes into the greeter, that's another point of
Hmm.
contact. A person talks to the bartender, another point of contact. A person talks to the server, another point of contact. A person talks to the food runner, another point, talks to the busser.
Hmm.
A, a chef has to make the food. There is probably 20 people in the point of contact that my guest or client has to have everything go well for them to have a positive
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
So the amount of options to fail is far greater than a different business, right?
Yeah. Sure.
So that's just one thing. Then you layer on, of those 20 touch points, there might be 30% that look at this as a career. Okay. 30% of those people are there in that business to be in that business for their life. Okay.
Okay.
Which is a very different mentality. When someone's trying to build a career and build a business, they tend to take more pride
Yeah. Sure.
and purpose. So that's something that we have to deal with. And that's okay, okay? Because
Hmm.
we understand that, listen, our job is to have you make a lot of money, and your job is to follow our standards and execute the way we want you to do. And you can do that as a stepping stone career, and that's perfectly fine, and we welcome that. But that just illustrates how many people there are between
Yeah.
us and a good review, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a challenge. And then what's now a challenge is now we're competing with, before, if you're a college student, right? Our workforce is really the 80% of our workforce is between the ages of 20 and 35, I would say. Okay.
Hmm.
So they're either in school, they're starting out a career, they're on their way to another career, they're
Mm.
in between careers, that type of thing. Well, before, there wasn't many options to have a job with limited, if you're, that you can have some flexible time and
Yeah.
that you can make some good money, right? Now there are. The gig economy has changed
Yeah.
that, right? Now you have people driving for Uber. Now I have my cocktail girls and bartenders. They are influencers on Instagram making hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? That's what they do. Okay. So for me to sit there and try to get them back behind the bar, they don't, no, that's not going to work. So now so I've lost people to Uber driving, to Uber Eats, to just all these types of gig economies. So we contend with that. So we absolutely have to build a much better culture than they have there, and that's what we have to work on.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, rest food in general is not going to get cheaper. The product itself is at the highest level that you're paying as a consumer, and you're paying as going into a grocery store, right? The bright spot was labor before it, front of the house labor. We were able to give tip credit to our front of the house people. So, you know, all the food runners, all the front of the house team, what they would do is, if hypothetically we have bartenders that make $500 a night, okay? Now, we would make sure they made the $15 an hour, but they would turn in $500. It would be calculated to make sure they hit that $15 minimum, would get a tip credit. Now there's no tip credit. So a bartender can make $1,500 a night. I still have to pay them $15 an hour, which doesn't seem fair, right?
Yeah.
Because my minimum wage in the kitchen is the same as the minimum wage in the front of the house, and they're not walking out with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have to work that out, okay? But having said that, food and cost of goods used to be the higher thing. Now labor is definitely the higher
Oh,
thing.
really
So,
interesting.
and now are contending with those two things. It doesn't leave much margin. And if you add back now that the fact of drinking is now going away, it's not going away, but it's
Yeah.
falling
Yeah.
significantly. The consumer health and wellness is really, you know, it's alcohol, and drinking alcohol is now on the wrong side of a trend, which it was always on the other side of that
Yeah.
trend before. So the industry is battling that as well.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think that if I'm hearing you correctly, it's you're trying to build an environment where people would come to work and
Yeah.
helping sort of cater to, whatever.
We have to build that environment on both sides, on the employee side and on the consumer side. I
Yeah.
mean, we have to build that environment on the consumer side, because look at how people eat these days. Okay. I could sit on my couch. I did it yesterday. Yesterday, I was just a chill out mode. I ordered 3 meals, great meals. One from my own restaurant, Java and Jam in the morning. I ordered a Italian meal and I ordered dinner. I didn't leave my house, and I had restaurant quality meals delivered to my seat.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
so now, for our standpoint, when someone's wanting to go out, we need to make sure that going out is something that they can't get anywhere else, and that's what's going to drive it.
Yeah, sure. I'm curious, do you find the market that you serve, do you think it's more or less demanding in terms of the
No,
expectation than,
no,
somewhere in the Midwest or a smaller
no.
town?
It is the
Because it's such a confluence here in South Florida.
that's
I mean, people from Europe, from
right.
South America,
Which
from
which makes
Caribbean,
it which makes it even more challenging, right?
I would
Because
think.
you know, people here, consumers in South Florida are probably some of the most well-versed food consumers in the nation, because it's the most international place of, it's one of the more international
Yeah,
communities in the world,
sure.
in the nation. So their view of food and culture could be very different than yours or mine.
Yeah.
And it's funny, if you have a here, if you were to run hypothetically, you open up a Spanish restaurant. Okay, if you open a Spanish restaurant in the Midwest, people are not going to be as critical
Yeah.
here, because that is you better know what you're doing, right?
Everybody uses the word authentic.
Like,
Is it
yeah,
authentic?
authentic,
Like, who
yeah,
gets to
right,
decide if it's
exactly,
authentic or not?
exactly. So
Some food blogger,
that's right.
right?
And everybody has an opinion, right? And with these bloggers and with these influencers and with social media, the person's view is what's right, no matter how the no matter how wrong their view might be. But
Yeah.
it's just out there, and it's
Yeah.
they're telling, and you can't get caught up in that stuff, right? You can't sit there and try to make your statement, or you try to make your point, and it is so different. The dining time has grown 37 minutes from in the 90s. 37 minutes longer for a diner, because what happens is, and New York Times did a big special on this. They
That sounds
took a
crazy.
they took a camera view of what happens in a dining room, and the greeter. It's so funny. Now, this doesn't happen at every table, but the greeter went to go sit at a table. No, they want to sit over here.
Oh,
Okay, so they move from there. Then they had to do their video of the place, and they had to get up from the table, and they walked around and took a video, and then they sit back down, and then the food comes and they have a video of it, and then they don't order because they want to
these are
have
just
like,
normal people.
these are just normal people.
Okay.
And what's happened now is that dining time has been stretched, right? So now you're seeing people limit. You're
That's
starting to
right.
see, especially in bigger cities. Miami is all the time. You have a 90-minute window, you have
Oh
a
yeah.
2-hour window, or you get charged, because people don't understand, this is their real estate. Restaurant
Yeah.
seats are restaurant, and you have 6 hours to make your money. And if all of a sudden now you are going to take 3 out of those 6 hours to make, because you're filming, it's tough. And I understand both sides of it.
Yeah. Right.
I
Me too.
totally understand both sides. I hate going into a restaurant where you sign up for all these rules and regulations. You have to be out by this time.
Yeah.
You can't sit more than blah blah. You're like, well, am I dining here, or am I going to a
Feel like you're
instructional thing here, right?
a mill or an assembly
Yeah.
line.
So
Right.
so
Oh,
I
pay
I,
you,
I totally understand how that
eat your meal and get
that,
out of
that
here.
works, but I also understand the restaurant side of it, and I'll use Miami is a little bit different. We have a couple spots in Miami, and it's a little different than in Broward. But there are a lot of cultures in Miami that showing up 45 minutes late
Yeah.
for anything is normal. But when you have a 9 o'clock reservation, you want to push that an hour. That is a tumbling effect for
Yeah.
restaurants. I
Right.
mean, you're not only you're having a table sit open, but now you're backed up and you're holding up another reservation who might show up on time, and the restaurant's the one in the middle trying to handle all that, right?
Make
Chaos.
everybody
That's
happy.
right. That's
Right.
just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. That's I'm getting a little like low level anxiety just thinking about trying to keep everybody happy, especially as like a people pleaser in nature, but
I gotta tell you, the bear that I would say the first couple seasons of definitely the first season, that was a very realistic show of the intensity that's behind the scene in a
yeah,
restaurant.
yeah,
It's funny. You open a dining room and it's just singing along. You walk through into the kitchen and it is like total chaos.
yeah.
It's controlled chaos, right? But that's just part of what keeps me going back too. It's an energy that you
Well,
don't
yeah.
experience all the time.
The energy was what I remember,
Yeah.
and I worked at a restaurant in college, and that was my experience doing it. And I remember at times, you could have 9 really nice guests,
Oh
and
yeah.
then one that just kind of, it's like their point to ruin your
Yeah.
day over something
Yep.
usually pretty minor.
Yep. Yep.
And you go home and you're like, you just got to be able to brush it off because the other 9 people were lovely,
Right.
and they
So
were.
where did you work when?
I worked at a place, and when I went to SMU,
Okay.
and I worked at a place that was called Grady's American Grill. So
Oh, sure. Yeah, they were all over the place.
yeah, I knew
They,
they
they
had.
had one in Plantation.
Did they?
Yeah, actually, they had one. And yeah, right at the Plantation Mall where I want to say where Darden has their former Smoky Bones out there.
I
That was a
didn't
Grady's
realize
way
that
back
they
in the
were
day.
local. I knew they were a chain, and I would place them somewhere between like maybe a Chili's
And
and
a
a Houston's,
Houston's.
like
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
and homemade all
Yep,
the
yep, yep,
salad
yep,
dressings
yep.
and stuff. And so that was a bunch of my friends worked there, and it was right by my apartment. So I worked there in college, and but the energy was what I
Yep.
remembered, and I really enjoyed that, and it getting out of my shell a little bit
Yeah.
because I was a sophomore, and it was probably my first real job outside of my father's
Yeah.
business.
I
So
I I absolutely would encourage any parent, if you're going to give your child a job or get them a job or
yeah,
encourage them to get a job when they're in high school, being in the restaurant industry. Now it's a double-edged sword. You don't want them to like it too much where they stay in it because it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
tough career, but it is critical to learn customer service and customer behavior,
yeah.
especially when someone's drunk and hangry, because that's when you really have to listen. I made
Yeah.
my daughters. They couldn't work in our restaurants, and they're not allowed to work in the restaurant business post high school. They're not.
I remember you
Yeah,
telling me that. I was
but
going to bring that
yeah,
up, but
but yeah, I made my daughters that they work for Elliott Wolf. I said you go work
yeah,
at Coconuts
that'd be
because
nice.
I didn't want them to. I didn't want the staff to treat them differently because they were
Yeah,
my daughter, and I didn't want the guests to treat them differently. Right? I wanted them to see what it really was about, and they still talk about it to this day. They're like, man, And my youngest daughter, she was a greeter at the country club, the
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale Country Club, and so she had to deal with regular guests and members. so but I encourage it. It's definitely worth. It opens your eyes, gives you a totally different perspective.
Yeah, and I think if you can succeed in that business in terms of just as an employee and making people happy and
Yeah,
serving their needs and learning how to problem solve, right?
yeah.
And
It's on your.
and
Yeah,
utilize your time wisely, right? Like full hands in
yeah,
and full hands
yeah,
and all
yeah,
those
yeah.
things,
Exactly.
right? And so
Still remember that
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
I do. It was valuable. It was a lot for me
Drop
for a
and
guy
go.
that
When
yeah,
you drop it.
looking at other people's tables and
Yeah.
cleaning them
Yep.
and but yeah, I mean that was definitely a lot to make sure you were using your time wisely and dealing with different personalities. And I had a lady one time. She said, "I'll do regular water, please." I come back and she said, "No." I said, "Regular. I don't want ice in here." And I said, "Well,
Yeah.
what does regular mean?" We could go into a philosophical debate. So I come back and I had taken the ice out and poured it. And she said, "No, I want warm water." I mean, it's like I guess this is like a European tradition or something. And so she may or may not have gotten toilet water in that
Yeah,
situation,
yeah.
but
It's funny
I'm
because
kidding. But
no, but so firsthand how challenging it can be, and we always tell our team, you can't let it get to who's right. Okay,
right,
they're right. It just
yeah,
the more you argue, we're gonna end up in the same place. It's just gonna be more expensive for us. Okay, meaning if they don't like it or they ate the whole thing and they don't like it, it's still they don't like it.
yeah,
Okay. And now you can hold your ground and do that, and then hope they
What are
don't
you achieving?
bitch or hope they don't write a review or hope that. But at the end of the day, if they do, you're going to have to call them back, invite them back in, and make it right. Okay, because our number one value is the guest above all else, and you have to adhere to that. And if you don't, it's going to get far more embarrassing you down the road because they're going to be right. So, and granted, sometimes, many times, the guest was wrong, but
Yeah.
they're right. Okay, and we don't we unless it's just egregious behavior where they're insulting
Abusive,
and
right? Yeah.
abusive but if it's something that a stupid conflict of some sort of I didn't order this and just let it go. It's not even worth it.
One thing you have to, I think, learn is to apologize, even though it's not your fault, or even though you didn't do anything wrong, or the restaurant didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, you have
Just
to
that apology
you,
can
you have to
disarm
eat a
people.
lot of pride.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Y-
One thing I enjoy about this podcast is learning things about people I didn't know. I didn't know that you came through Hillstone.
oh, no
I'm a
kidding.
huge fan of
Oh,
Hillstone and
okay.
Houston's, as is my business partner. And so, um, and specifically, what I like about them is the service, but just the execution. The
It's
menu is always simple.
the gold standard of the restaurant industry, and many people try and copy them. Many people try to emulate them. Nobody even comes close. I've seen so many concepts that we're going to do it like Houston's, or we're going to, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, right? But people don't realize and recognize the level of intensity that they have in their teams, the incredible commitment to consistency they have in their teams.
Mm-hmm.
When I say incredible consistency, they do things behind the scenes that you know people just wouldn't even fathom they do, but the outcomes are where they are because they do those incredible things that you would never expect them to do. You know,
We go to the one in Boca often because our office used to be right there in Military
I opened that
until we
one. Yeah,
moved it down. Did you?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, you walk in, for those who don't know, and you're like this to the
yeah,
kitchen,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
could see the grill going, and I love just
yeah,
those few minutes to watch that, or like
yeah.
just to see the poetry in motion,
So that's great.
controlled
So
chaos.
Todd, who is the kitchen manager down there, trained me in Lauderdale at on the
Really?
line. Yeah, you have to go through the train. He trained me on the line. Yeah, it's a great company. It's probably the most disciplined company I've ever been involved in. They are not they are not afraid to hold a standard. And when I say that, when I say you're not afraid to hold a standard, meaning if you have a long-term employee who's been a great employee for a very long time and they did not hold a standard, you will not hold your job. And it's that simple. And
If there's
a
a
lot
drop off.
a lot of people say they're committed like that, but they're not. They're,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
long-term employee has been a great employee
Yeah.
and no, there's a very defined line and it's not blurred at all. And I respect the shit out of them.
So Tim, I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of move on to the next subject, and we want to talk about partnerships, strategy, M&A, which is kind of the core of what we do
Mhm.
on Like a Champion, and what we do at SM2 Advisors. As you guys have scaled organically through new ventures, primarily with new concepts, have you ever considered acquisitions, or have you made any acquisitions as part of your growth strategy?
Yeah, sure. So we bought a company called Shrimp Basket, which was a at the time we bought it, it had about 17 units in 5 different states, and we grew it to about 39 and flipped it out to another private equity company. We were a development partner with Anthony's Coal Fire Pizza,
Mm-hmm.
and we grew and then sold that to a private equity group. We exited the first round at the first sale. Uh, we should have stayed in, but we did. Hindsight's 2020.
Did you sell that to Boyne Capital?
We sold ours to Quilvest out of England. The first one was Quilvest. They bought it when we had, I want to say, 36 units. We had about 16 or 17 on the West Coast, and Anthony had the remaining on the East Coast. Um, And then and we've purchased Casablanca as a
Yeah.
one-off restaurant because again, location was
Historic
fantastic,
restaurant. Yeah.
historic. It was a legacy restaurant, 25 years, and we figured it's great real estate. And Steve had owned the real estate anyway, so the business was coming up for the opportunity, and we jumped on that. But typically we, when we if we buy a restaurant company, it's something that we can build out. So then
Hmm.
we see the opportunity for growth, or we see an opportunity with the location. It's typically if we go through a acquisition, but typically we develop our own.
So it's not really part of your maybe core growth strategy,
No,
but
but
when
we
opportunities come
come up.
along,
That's right.
yeah, yeah, makes
Now we
sense.
were having an internal conversation that everyone sees us as 14 different restaurant, right? Because
Right.
we have those different concepts. When in actuality, we're we're one restaurant company with 14 different brands, but they're operated on the same principles. I mean,
Hmm.
my managers can look. I learned this at Hillstone. So our structure and operating principles and our KPIs are all the same from store to store.
Hmm.
The menu and the window dress is different. So
Yeah.
really, if I can pop in and out managers at different locations, and they just need to catch up on the menu, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and then they can operate the same. Our closing procedures, our opening procedures are the same. The way we run our staffs are the same. The service standards are the same or very similar. So those types of things.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting, and seems to make sense. It's replicatable, but
that, that,
it
that's
the
right.
slight different,
Right. And when
sort of.
because everyone sees that, oh my God, they have different which we do, but when you start to peel back the layers, it's very similar.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, we talk a lot about like on this podcast about successful partnerships and those that go the other direction. And just curious as to what you've learned to watch out for in terms of, because I believe that you take on outside investors
Mm,
for your different concepts, and it's not always the same you know capital
right,
stack for
right.
each one. What do you look out for in partners, and what's maybe red flags that you've learned over the course of your career to sort of steer clear from when it comes to the partnerships and the alignments that you put together.
Well, again, so I've been very fortunate. I have great partners, and I think that I don't really. If someone wants to become a partner with us, uh, we just want to make sure that the reason they're getting into the restaurant business is the right reasons.
Hmm.
I mean, this industry is riddled with, the wrong reasons, right? The party atmospheres, the party environments, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And we just need to stress to our investors, which and we have, and they I think they respect this, is that this is a business. It's a business. It's not a party. We host parties, but we run it as a business.
Hmm.
So you never see me walking around with a cocktail in my hand. You never see my team walking around with drinks.
Yeah.
This is no, this is not. And we've had people who I've had great clients that get upset. That they're not investors, but I've had clients want to buy me a drink and it's
Hmm.
9 o'clock and I'm like, listen, Noah, but thank you. And they're like, oh, come on. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, what do you do? I'm an attorney. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll see you Tuesday at 10 a.m. You and I'll have a cocktail at your office. And then it kind of puts it in perspective for them. But
Yeah.
we just try to make sure it's a business first. And we've had some great partners. And I will say that, you know, we don't bat 1,000, and I
Mhm.
think that what's important for us as partners is we don't like to surprise our partners. We give them the data to tell you how
Yeah.
the restaurant's doing, and we'll explain strategy. And if our investors have every right to call us about anything they want, and we'll have an open conversation about what we're doing and how we're handling it. And if they have a different solution, we'll listen to that and we'll have a discussion around that. And I
Mhm.
think partners go on both sides of the equation, right? I mean, a good partnership is not just one partner being good to the other, it's two partners being good to each other. And that's what makes a great partnership. Now, I have a responsibility as an operator, and they have way less responsibility because they put their capital in,
Mhm.
but you have to be a good partner on both sides.
And you guys have gone through the process of hiring proper attorneys to draw up the
Yes,
documents and
yes.
operating agreements that
Mhm.
have, are fully,
Right.
you've thought through all the different scenarios and your responsibility as operators and
Yeah.
and your and your investors and what rights they have and don't have. And so you spent the money to make sure that all of those things have been.
Yeah, but I would say this, that
It doesn't cover it all.
no, if you're reaching into your file to pull out the operating agreement,
That's a problem.
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, and no matter what was signed a year, 5 years, 10 years before that, there's something where we are that you're pulling out the operating agreement, and there's probably a lot of moments that we could have got to before you had to pull out the operating
Yeah.
agreement
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get to a resolution, in my opinion. Right? I mean,
Yeah. Well, I think um, I totally agree with that. I also think that um, investors, especially who aren't, you're in it every day,
mm,
right? And you guys probably got these things memorized, but investors can be forgetful
mm.
in terms of
Oh,
the
sure. Oh, yeah,
processes
yeah.
and voting rights and what if we have to do capital calls and all
Yep.
those things. Well, it's like to spend the money to do it properly, because many people don't.
Yeah.
It may surprise you, but many people form partnerships and they have no operating agreement, no shareholder agreement. And what you just you want to avoid conflict, especially
You
if you're
do.
taking money from friends and family,
You
right?
know,
You don't want, hey,
so
here it is in the agreement.
and I would say this, that and I think you can ask my investors this, is that we as the restaurant people really try to shield our partners from what they didn't sign up for in the operating agreement. Now, even when it comes to capital calls, we try. If we're going to do a capital call, we're at wit's end.
Yeah,
Normally there's a bunch of levers that we can turn off before we get to
it's a
that.
four-letter word. Yeah,
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 but sometimes it just happens, and you just work through it the best you can. I mean, there's no. I believe that what TRP will never do will never be mischievous. It would never be do anything with fraud. It will never do anything that is sleight of hand. We'll operate with the highest integrity until we can't, and then we have to go out to the partner and say, okay, this is what do we want to do with capital? What do we want to
yeah.
do with this business? And that thing. So, but there's a lot of, if we're pulling out the operating agreement, we've done something that we can't agree on, and we've probably had a lot of different conversations before we got to that.
Hmm. Yeah. Tim, what about mentors? Has there been a mentor or
Oh,
mentors in your life that have helped get you where you are?
absolutely. I think that I am such a big believer in mentorship. One, Steve Halmos has been my mentor. I He has been the most valuable person in my world. I believe
How long has that been a
about a
relationship of yours?
year after we started, year and a half after we started our business, about a year after we started our business, he was a longtime guest of ours, and he had Reed's River House at the time we started working together, and he's been, as an entrepreneur, especially a young entrepreneur, you're figuring it out, right? And you can't go to your investors and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, because they've
Hmm.
invested in you to
Yeah.
say, here you are telling them you know what you're doing, and then situations come up you may not know what you're doing, so you can't sit there and turn to them.
Hmm.
You can't sit there and turn to your team because you're the leader. So who do you turn to, right? You can
Yeah.
read all the books you want, but there's no better sounding board than a person who has been through it or has experience with it. And so I find that information is so valuable. And I try to mentor people as I pay it forward. I
Yeah.
think that I love to see young people that have a hustle and have an idea and are just grinding it out. And if I can help them sidestep a landmine or propel them forward, I'm always willing to do so.
Where do you say that Steve has helped you the most, and where do you think that you've been the most helpful in the context of? I think we all excel or we have sort of our own superpowers, and certainly we're all wired differently. But
Yeah.
like, I'm curious as to where do you think that Steve had the biggest impression on you, and
I
and
mean, he's
where
okay. There's so many places. It's hard. And I'm not just bullshit. It's hard to do one. I mean, from understanding the legalities of the business, meaning operating agreement,
Mm,
leases, just investors, partners, you know,
sure.
just navigating the city with things.
Oh,
So
cities.
many,
Yeah.
so many aspects of it that, I and he's always been a now over the years our relationship has grown very, very close. So he's always been a calm in all the storms, from
Yeah.
being sued in litigation to all kinds of stuff, to where hurricanes pop up and my businesses are going to shit, and will we come out of this thing, and COVID. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
let's talk about staring into the abyss, right?
Yeah.
You get a phone call from the mayor who says you're shutting down a restaurant for 2 weeks, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
So it's always listen, it's always nice to have a coach, right? A coach
Yeah.
that you can count on to say, hey, am I doing this right? What should I be
Mhm.
doing? And them and having that relationship where they're going to give you the unfiltered truth, and it's yours to do with what you want, right?
And I think there's a component of they have your best interest at heart,
Yeah,
right? They,
absolutely.
they want to see
They
you
want us. Yeah,
succeed, and
absolutely.
that's part of their. You would even argue they're in their legacy.
No, I would say there's so many times, especially when I was young, where I'm negotiating these agreements with Steve. And now he is, this is, now he's an investor too,
Hmm.
okay? And he's saying, no, you don't want to do that. That's giving me too much. You don't want me to have that control in this deal. Just not because if he
Yeah.
was doing it for himself, he wouldn't have said anything.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
didn't, it was in the agreement. It was already, I put it in the agreement. He's like, I think he made me want to think about this, so that kind of stuff.
Well, that's neat. I read a lot. I told you prior to the interview, case studies about Steve
Yeah.
Halmos and what he did, especially he was in college, I think, when
Oh,
they
it's an incredible story.
invented credit card insurance, and just a level of entrepreneurship and maturity that I have a hard time imagining at that age, especially just comparing to myself, which is, but what would you say is your sort of superpower that you bring? And sorry to be like, way too metaphorical there, but I see you, just knowing you as long as I have, you seem like a very disciplined person. You're, you're like you said, there's, I don't think you're not a big drinker. You're up,
Mm.
you're very much into fitness.
Yep.
You're always dressed well. Like, do you think that that's part of what you were to bring, is to help bring structure to the people that you're mentoring and helping them
Well,
understand discipline? Because
I think structure and discipline at the base is critical for any success in my
yeah,
mind. Okay, I'm a big person of routine and structure, and trying not to negotiate with my every day. You negotiate with yourself. Am I
yeah,
going to get
sure.
up? Am I going to go work out? And I try my best not to negotiate. You know, and I try to do that personally, and that carries over into business. If I don't allow myself to do that personally, it's going to carry over into
Yeah,
business.
sure.
And I find that if you now you're always going to end up having a fallback day or something like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah,
the fewer of those, the better off you're going to be. And if you can learn that negotiating with yourself is not going to happen, then you can learn not to negotiate in how you do business. When I say certain principles that you don't falter on, how you treat your people,
yeah,
how
yeah,
getting into the office at a certain time, having because people follow your lead, right?
yeah.
If you're a leader that is all over the board and doesn't see, your team's going to see that, and if it's okay with you, then it's going to be okay with them, and I'm not okay with that.
Recently, I've gone down this rabbit hole of watching old Nick Saban, like,
I love that guy.
leadership videos, and some people I think are really harsh on him and his legacy and his demeanor. I would say I find him a breath of fresh air
I,
because he's so direct and clear.
I love it.
Specifically, what I like about him is I feel like he's a guy I've met him. Certainly, don't have a relationship with a guy. You always know where you stand with him. There's never. I feel like we're very poor as a society in dealing with conflict. With him, he'll deal with conflict with you directly
That's
and
right.
honestly and respectfully. Might be a little firm, but like I find that
But you know
very
where you, and
refreshing,
you know
rather
where you
than
stand.
somebody talking about me.
I
So,
absolutely agree.
but he boiled it down, and it's another thing I love is simplicity. He said it boils down to two things when it comes to execution and discipline and leadership. You have these things that you don't want to do, but you need to do them. Are you going to do them?
That's right.
and you have these things that you want to do that you know you shouldn't do,
How
are
are
you
you
going
going
to
to do them?
refrain from doing them?
That's right.
And in his context, he's talking mainly about football players. We can involve all of us.
You could do
And
that
I
with
just love that.
everything. You could apply that principle to everything you do in your day. And I agree with you. I love that guy. I don't like when we were playing against him,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Who
you know,
does?
there is reasons why Nick Saban has been the most successful college football coach, okay? And it's not because his recruiting, it's not
Yeah,
because
it's not
this,
because he's
it's
cheating.
because of
Yeah,
the whole thing, okay?
right.
And it's because of the way he ran his program, okay? That's why he had the outcomes he had. I I love watching and learning from people who are at the top of their craft. A guy like Michael Jordan, okay? I've watched, I kid you not, I've watched The Last Dance over the 10-part series over a dozen
Oh,
times,
really? That's
okay?
amazing.
And every time I get something more out of it because, you know, you have a guy to stay at that level for that long,
Yeah.
to have your team stay at that level. They didn't want to stay at that level. He forced them to be at that
Hmm.
level. You know, and you're going to have some collateral damage with that. You're going to get a reputation of being a jerk,
Yeah,
aggressive.
right.
But if you look at the results, those were non-negotiables to get to that level. You know, a guy like Kobe Bryant, those guys had the ultimate resolve because they were committed to a goal that they set for themselves that no one was going to touch them from getting, you know, and the, the 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 body of work that they had to do to get them there, no other people were willing to do that.
Yeah, Michael was a guy that I think played with it, something to prove, even after none of us were already convinced,
That's right.
And so that was what I liked about him the most. Like he felt like he played with something to prove, like a
All
chip
the
on his
time.
shoulder, and it was just never going to be
That's
enough for him. And so, um, yeah, Jordan's a great one. So we talk about mentorship, but I've also noticed you're very much involved in the community and various nonprofits and charities. What drives you there? What would you say your passion is to give back, and why?
well. Again, I think that first off, I love Fort Lauderdale. I love this community. I raised my kids here. I ultimately would love to see them come back here, raise their families. I don't know if they're going to do that,
Yeah,
but I just think it's a great place to live, and I think that if you're not giving back to the community, I just think it's something that we all should do. I mean, I believe
yeah.
it's a core value of our company. We were heavily involved in local charities with a strong emphasis on Jack and Jill because it serves an underprivileged population. But I think it's important. I think it's important, and I think it's a great way to express what culture is in your company if you're out in the community giving back, and
Mhm.
you know, I just think it's important.
That's
Plus,
that's amazing.
the a desired outcome from that is especially for young people. I did now this is something that I didn't get involved in charitable work for this, but this was a nice outcome that I didn't realize. You get to meet great community leaders and then you get to develop these wonderful relationships that are on a more personal level than
Hmm.
just being in a business environment. And a lot of opportunities come through those connections, you know.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
It's kind of like one hand washes the other, right? Like
well,
you're
it's
doing the right things and you're helping give back and contributing to the
well,
community,
I
but
will say this. If I'm in a
building bridges.
boardroom with someone, you know, working on charitable events and I'm on my monthly board meeting and I'm out there socially with them, I'm getting to know you on a personal level. And all of a sudden, hey Tim, I have this over here. Would you be interested in that? The negotiation with that is a lot more friendly. You cut through this posturing
Hmm.
and you get to a deal a lot faster with a lot less headaches and a lot less expense, right? And that's through a relationship. That relationship was created through a charity, and your reputation through that charity is different than your reputation through the business, so you're approached in a different manner.
Yeah, sure.
So that's kind of,
You're building bridges really,
yeah,
and rapport, and certainly there's I think there's a comfort level with familiarity
yeah,
that
there
goes
is,
to right.
and
And so, just sort of looking ahead, how do you think about succession planning with your role and ownership in TRP? Is that something that you've put thought
Yes. Oh
into,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely yes.
and what does that look like?
So right now we are doing that exercise right now. We've hired a person to come in, a kind of corporate strategist to
Hmm.
help us kind of look at that. Aaron, who you know, Aaron
Hmm.
Abramoff, I've elevated him to president now of the company.
Okay. Yeah.
He is tagged to succeed me at CEO when that time is right. When that time is, I'm not sure, but we are setting it up to where it's because right now we have a lot on the map too, so we want to make sure we are growing at the pace that we can grow effectively and efficiently too. Um, so we're working that out now, and I think that's very important. I think that if you don't have a plan with anything,
Yeah.
if you don't have a plan, you just don't have a plan, and you shouldn't be planning anything, right? So when I say that jokingly, but if you're growing and you don't have a plan that's falling underneath that, you shouldn't be growing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that come into me like, oh, I've got this going on, I got this going on, and then opening restaurants is the easiest thing in the world. Okay, all you need is money. Okay, keeping them open is where it gets really hard. Okay,
Yeah.
and so you
Sure.
see all these people, oh, I'm opening this, I'm opening that. Well, that's great. Okay, then you ask, well, how are you going to keep them open? Okay, where's your infrastructure? How are you going to execute these things? And we, I meet with a lot of people that have a great growth plan, but they have no plan on how to keep them open. So, which is interesting.
It seems like there are a lot of like sort of boom and bust cycles with restaurants, or just being the new hotspot, and then
Yeah,
sort of just not able to stay on top with the execution or whatever.
yeah.
Um,
The
What's the
honeymoon
common
period is
thread?
the easiest part, right?
Yeah.
That is, and people start to
Everybody wants to go to the hot new spot.
when you open your doors, if you do a good if you have we know that at the restaurant people, if we're going to open our doors, we're going to get hit right away. So
Yeah.
that makes it more challenging too, because as you build a brand, people have a certain expectation, and there still are nuances in how to execute with new teams, right?
Hmm.
So we have to execute out of the gate, probably because our guest is less forgiving. Our expectation is
Yeah,
that we're
for
going to
sure.
deliver. Okay, so even if it's 2 weeks old, we need to deliver. And we get hit really hard, and
Yeah.
that just so we have to make sure we have our teams trained. We have to do a lot of things about pacing the restaurant to make sure you don't
Yeah.
get the staff overwhelmed. It's a lot of stuff that goes into a restaurant opening, and knock on wood, we get hit hard. Hopefully, we're executing where they want to come back and tell their friends, and
Yeah.
that's what the goal is.
No, that's great. Certainly a higher bar than a mom and pop that opens a pizza shop. People are
But
coming to
now
you
with
and they're,
social media, you'd be surprised on how well these mom and pops could open. I mean,
yeah.
you know,
I just mean the expectation
yeah,
is different.
sure.
Like, oh,
It's crazy
George
how
and Betty opened a place, and if you're like, go
I
check it
I
out. And
am getting. I'm it's somewhat just so surprising how you see some of these places take off with like they launched on TikTok and they are just booming.
well, what's this guy with the steakhouse all over the world, the Salt Bay guy,
Yeah,
and he
well,
sells these
n-
gold steaks, and
now he's blowing up though. Right now I mean, blowing up in a bad way,
yeah,
imploding.
I was gonna say,
Yeah. So he got out front of a. I think at the end of the day, you can't have. There has to be some substance, not all sizzle, right?
yeah, right,
A lot of these places get with all this sizzle, and then below that is not substance, and then they're like, why did I just waste all this
big
money? And
facade and
yeah,
a lot of pomp, and yeah,
yeah. But there's
um,
this. I mean, there's a chicken Caesar wrap place in Boca that has lines around the building. It really launched. I'll tell you a funny story about social media real quick. Okay, so we this flaming tomahawk. We launched this thing about 3 years now at YOLO, and it was I saw it at a steakhouse in Vegas. I said, this is the coolest thing.
it sounds amazing.
For listen, the restaurant business. The only thing original about the restaurant business is the swinging doors in the saloon. Everything else is taken from somebody
Yeah,
else. It's
yeah,
seen. It's
yeah.
so we've taken some inspirations, let's call it, from other places. So we saw this rolling flaming tomahawk. I thought this thing was going to take off. It it was it was hardly anything going, right? We launched it, we're doing like 3 or 4 a week. I'm like, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
terrible. So we got to the point where, and to each one of those carts costs us like $3,000 to get a custom built. So we have an investment in
Yeah.
this. We got 3 carts, we got this whole team, we got equipment to cook this tomahawk in the whole 9 yards. We're doing like 4 or 5 a week. So I go to my marketing director. I'm like, we got to boost this up. So she's like, okay, I have an influencer coming in. Now I'm thinking, you see influencer, you have this certain
Yeah. Yeah.
person in your mind is
Yeah.
this. No, this is a food influencer, a food blogger. Her name is Gigi. She's a sweetheart of a girl. She brings in her mom, and she's doing. I'm like, okay, Nikki, are you? This is what. She's like, let's just wait. She launches that thing. Within 2 weeks, we got 1 million views. We have people coming in
That's insane.
from Jupiter driving in to get it. I saw that. So last year, we almost did $1 million worth of tomahawk sales. So
That's
think about that.
incredible.
Think about that. And it was
Truly
social
a
media.
sort of viral, like,
It's viral. It's
sensation.
crazy how powerful this is.
Could you have
And it can work
imagined that?
against you. No. And the thing is, it can work against you
Yeah.
too. You know,
Yeah.
you get caught on the wrong side of a discussion or an event or something like that.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
so it's the world we live in.
So that's amazing. Great. What a great story. One of my favorite parts of doing this. 30 years of doing this, you could go back the beginning of your journey and give yourself some advice. What would that look like? What would it be? If you could bypass some of the
Okay,
heartache that
a
you've
couple things.
experienced.
A couple things. Don't beat yourself up too much. Don't have so much negative self-talk, and move faster.
What do you mean by move faster?
I think
It's
that
like move on from failures faster, or
I think all of the above.
yeah,
I think we've sat on some opportunities, and we didn't move as fast as we should have, and we got on the wrong side of the trend.
yeah,
I mean that's that happens, and I think that if you move faster with things, a lot of times the reason you don't move is self-doubt, and you start listening
imposter syndrome kind
imposter
of.
syndrome.
Yeah,
You start
yeah,
listening to all the negative self-talk and things like that, and if you cut that out, I think you would make a decision faster and move on, or not.
yeah,
Either do it or don't do it, right?
yeah. Well, you've watched the Michael Jordan thing enough, but there's so many other endless examples of successful people that have failed many times.
Oh, yeah.
And I read Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, and
Oh
I was
yeah,
like, that was one banking
that's
catastrophe after
after
the
the
next.
other.
Like, it's just because the guy did well doesn't mean he didn't have challenges and failures and all those things. So that is a really encouraging thing if you think about it, right? Like, you can actually fail and actually still succeed
I
in the
think the
long run.
reality
So
of business is you fail way more than you succeed. Your successes, there's a bunch of failures that happen on the way to success, right? And the success is what's paramount. But
yeah,
there is no success without failure. I don't care who you are.
yeah,
That person has failed somewhere along the way, because they're successful because they learn from their failures.
yeah, absolutely. Um, as we do our little rapid fire at the end, like we do, what's your go-to meal? Best meal at best restaurant? Let's say,
Well, okay, it's Italian because I'm Italian,
yeah,
yeah, right?
yeah,
So I love the lasagna at Anthony's Runway,
yeah.
and I love the chicken cacciatore at Cafe Moderano.
Oh,
So
yeah,
so if I go out to dinner, I'm going to one of those places typically. I mean, because I'm in restaurants.
yeah.
Yeah,
Italian is a great choice
that's
for me
yeah.
too. I am not Italian, but I love that food. And for me, I'm a simple chicken parm guy.
Oh
How
yeah,
can you
yeah,
execute in
yeah,
chicken parm is how I'm going to
yeah,
judge you as a restaurant. But it's usually not too hard to make it, at least good,
yeah.
right? But great is really different. Anthony's is one where I've had it. They're
What about
amazing
you?
for
What's
sure.
yours go to?
That's it probably is Italian
Yeah.
for real.
For
I
me, it's
mean,
just because that's what my mom.
garlic bread
Yeah, it's
and
just comforting.
just but it's also the culture to me. It's just always feels like
Yeah,
family and
right.
celebration and around the table, and that's a big part of it for me. One thing I like to do at home is I've done seafood boils for large groups
Oh,
of
dude, that's
people,
fun. Yeah, we
and
put on the
we've done it at
table. Yeah,
campouts, yeah,
yeah.
with the butcher paper and roll your
Indian
sleeves up.
Princess, you do that at Indian Princess?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so Yeah, I just love doing that. Just the
Yeah.
unpretentiousness and approachability of just a boil and eating, everybody's shoulder to shoulder in
But
the
right
same.
there, what you just said is the core of restaurants. It's the community, it's sharing, it's the way people interact.
Yeah.
That is the heart and soul of why people go into restaurants.
Well, I think that you've harnessed that experience very, very well in an industry that's so challenging. It's inspiring for me to see, and um,
Thank you.
I'd love to hear the story. It's been so interesting. In closing, we always do this, but we're here at Rebel Motor Company, who has graciously allowed us to use the
Yeah, it's
facility.
very
You
cool
can see in the
space.
background. If you've got one dream car that they can bring in for you, resto mod for you, what would it be that's a fit for your personality
Hmm.
and lifestyle and all of that?
Well, some of these old Ford Broncos, that one down there is pretty damn
There's a
cool too.
few. There's a
Yeah.
few of those for sure.
Yeah,
Is it nostalgic or is it
yeah, it's
muscle
more
or?
nostalgic. I'm not considered I like nice cars, but I'm not a car junkie.
Yeah,
I know how to turn it on and drive. But I like the older cars. They're done really well. You got some killer cars in here, though.
we've got a whole. Yeah, we've got new Porsches and old Broncos, and we've got my little '69 fastback Mustang
Oh
that
yeah,
someday is going to be a reality. But
that's awesome. No,
Tim,
it's a very cool space, though. I
Tim
enjoyed it.
Petrillo,
Well, I enjoyed being here. Thank
thanks
you.
for coming in. It
Thank you for
was
having
awesome
me.
to have you.
Great to see you. Thank you. All right, that was fun.